What do you think?
I think we're dead meat. Real dead meat.
Go ahead and laugh, you guys. If I ever find a little bastards that did this, they're dead meat.
Hey, Chris, thanks for joining us.
Yes.
In a very weird interview space.
Our little haunted interview that we're doing in this apparently haunted building.
Yeah.
It is very haunted.
Yeah.
Drop is your latest film that we just saw last night here at the Overlook Film Festival. Loved it. It's exactly what you want from the trailer. Like, we watched the trailer, we were like, this looks like a really good time. And it's.
I'm glad it delivered.
Exactly.
Yes, it did. I think at the Q&A last night, you compared it to Red Eye, and I could hear the kind of collective, including coming from myself, the kind of realization and the total connection of this inspiration, because that it feels very much in that vein. Like, structurally, it's similar. You've even got the kind of, is this a cute movie? Is it a romantic movie? The kind of
Well, yeah, because it's got
of
a little bit of the. It's not. I mean, it's not technically a meet cute, but it's it's still a date. And they're nervous, and then of course, shit goes south.
Yeah, and it's so fun to watch a heroine in this situation, just like exhausting all her options, trying to figure out what to do when she's so outmatched for most of the duration of the film, just like with Red Eye.
Yeah.
It's in this like confined space. This is one location. You mentioned it was a set.
Yeah.
You said like a 12,000
Yeah,
foot
big
set.
ass set.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, it's a beautiful set. Like, I was there obviously through the whole sort of process and sort of designing and building and all of it. So I was checking in daily, obviously, to see the progress. But the actors were not. And so we had started filming off location for a while, just out and about in the city. And then when we finally arrived and the set was completely done and the actors walked on set, they were like, like, they could not believe it.
I bet it's such a help for them.
Oh,
for their job.
100%.
To be in that location.
100%, because you get the best of both worlds. You get to be in an environment that feels authentic, but it's also an environment that we have total control over, as opposed to trying to shoot in some real restaurant where you run into 9 million problems that you can't solve.
Yeah, from hours that you're able to like. I'm assuming the sets were you able to like move walls out for shots?
Absolutely,
Yeah,
we could move walls. We had total control of lighting. In fact, generally speaking, like, because it was all done from sort of like this motherboard, so it was pre-lit. So like, we would really just show up and flip a few switches, and we were good to go.
Oh yeah, there's not as much like moving light.
No,
stands.
we barely were moving light stands at all.
That sounds like a director's dream.
We finished 3 days early.
Wow. That is unheard of.
It is unheard of,
that's
but
a
yeah.
studio's dream.
Yeah, right.
They were very happy, and then I spent all of it on the opening credits.
I mean, they're beautiful. These like objects being smashed.
Yeah,
It's so,
which was real.
Oh, okay.
That's all
that
was real.
So like slow
That was all
motion
practical.
photography.
Yeah, we did.
And
We half of those, if not most of those, were actual props from the movie.
Okay.
That we had multiples of that were shipped from Ireland to the States. And then we rigged all of them with explosives, and we blew everything up.
Yeah, because I'm watching it, I'm like, you feel like they should be falling and hitting the ground and bursting, but that's not what they're doing. They're like exploding midair.
Yeah, well, but we were playing with a lot of different kinds of methodology, and at one point we did discuss, like, could we shoot through some type of like plexiglass shield and throw things down, but it was less dynamic. It didn't look as cool.
You don't have the
messy.
multi-directional of it
Exactly, and so by suspending everything on a wire and blowing them up, we got that effect.
That's so
instead,
fun.
which was
And
a lot
so that's
cooler.
what you got to do with those extra.
Yeah,
shooters.
because Blumhouse, if you watch Blumhouse movies, that's not a thing they do.
Yeah.
Typically, like, you have a pretty modest budget for your titles, and it's very rare these days to even see a title sequence in the front of a movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, usually it's just like
It's
down
always
or
at the
lower
end
third.
now, and because everybody
yeah.
likes to get to the movie quickly now. That's like the trend. And because I wanted the movie to be both sort of a modern movie, but also a throwback movie to Hitchcock, but also to the 90s as well. It felt like we needed something at the beginning of the movie, and it also just kind of felt. Someone said that it felt like a promise to the audience, and so I think that's a really cool way of framing it. That it gives you. It's almost like an overture.
Yeah.
And
I feel like you probably have a little bit of pull with Blumhouse since you've been with them for so long, writing all those Paranormal Activity sequels and directing what might be our favorite, the marked ones.
We love the
That's so awesome.
We did a whole, we called it Paranormal Pool Party on the podcast, where we did every single paranormal activity. It's still one of the most popular things we've
Yeah, it was like during the
done.
summer, we had like floaties on and stuff.
That's
The marked
amazing.
ones was like truly, James is like, we only have half an hour. You can't just talk about the marked ones. But I love it. I love just the wraparound of this, bringing back all the lore to this. When you think about that first movie, you wouldn't have expected that to become a series with deep lore, which is so fun.
And none of us did, to be honest, stepping into it. And I came into part 2 when the house was on fire, you know, and they had tried to make the movie the way Oren Peli made the original, which was like no script and kind of on the fly.
Oh, okay.
And they had shot for a couple weeks and shut production down, and they were sort of in a panic. And then I sort of stumbled into it. And then what I at least sort of declared was like, you need a script.
Yeah.
Like that was lightning in a bottle. We need a very definitive map. And of course you hire great actors who throw the dialogue away or don't use it at all. But that was sort of how I fell
I never
into
realized that like the first one
franchise.
didn't have a script and then you
No.
came in and wrote the script.
Yeah,
because
it's kind of like a Blair Witch thing where their names are even just the actors'
Oh, yeah.
names.
Yeah. I mean, Oren shot that movie on his weekends. 'Cause
Yeah.
everybody had jobs.
And marked ones like no, I'm bringing it back to drama.
We're not going to even talk about this movie.
No.
I would love it if we
We're coming
flipped
back
this
to
over
drama.
and it was the Mark One's poster.
It's kind of like an exception, I feel, to the type of characters that movie's led by. It's like 2 boys, like it's but most of your filmography is led by women, like this movie, and there's so much history in like horror academia, you know, about why it is that horror so often it's a female leading character, and I'm curious, just as someone who like clearly gravitates towards those stories or that perspective, like why you think that's so appealing, or what is it about that's really appealing to you?
I have a very specific, I think, take and angle on it, which is I'm a gay man, and I think most gay men love strong women. Most of us were raised by them in some capacity or another. I grew up with a really strong mom. I have 4 sisters. And a lot of my cinematic heroes were always women. And so I think there's still kind of like, I am emulating that to some degree. You know, I'm, Ripley in Aliens, and Laurie Strode. And so I think that, at least I would say for queer people, I think we all sort of have a final girl inside of us, because we have to face so much fear and adversity when we are kind of dealing with that stuff. And so I think there's always been a connection there, for me at least. I can only speak for myself.
I mean, Tree, you know, from Happy Death Day, one of the best characters, love her so much.
It's so funny when because I started on Happy Death Day as a writer and not a director. There was another director who was going to make the movie. And so they had hired me to rewrite the script. And I remember when I took it on and I wrote it, I remember the studio was like, she's so unlikable.
Yeah.
In the beginning.
Yes.
And it was such a red flag to them. And I was like, but that's the point. That's the growth. Like she transforms, and then you go from thinking this is the worst person alive to like, this person is amazing. And it's so fun to watch that transformation. And also because you have someone like Jessica who's so good, who found likability in her, even in her worst. I think that was sort of the secret sauce to the part. But yeah, I like complex characters. Bringing it back to Drop.
Yeah.
That's why I loved Violet.
Yeah.
Because she's on the surface someone who seems to have it sort of really well put together, even though she's sort of feeling out sort of a new relationship, or at least opening herself up to dating. And then as the movie evolves, you start to realize, oh no, like a lot of even her whole career to some degree is a facade.
Yeah.
You know,
Or
and
a reaction to like
it's a
what has happened
reaction
to
to
her.
something, and that she's convinced herself that she's moved past it, but then discovers when she's up against it that she hasn't. And she finds out that someone is preying on her victimhood and using that against her. And so that's what I love so much about the movie and the character, is that you see how she is still trying to find her courage.
Yeah, her and Tree are kind of like a weird yin and yang, where Tree, you meet her and like you say, she's on the surface very unlikable, but as the movie progresses, she finds stuff within herself that she learns to love about herself, and the audience does too. Whereas Drop, she seems like she has it all together. She's a working professional, beautiful home. She's got a
good
kid.
mom and all the things.
And then we learn that she herself has so much that she doesn't like about herself and that she blames herself for. There's such an interesting kind of inverse of each
and
other.
you saying that just it puts that first scene where she's doing the telehealth and says like,
turn the
camera around, look at yourself.
Look at yourself.
She has to do that to herself.
Exactly. That's kind of what that whole scene is ultimately about. But it's another thing that I love to explore in all my work, which is, and it's the relatable factor, I think, of what I'm trying to do, which is that, we're all struggling, we're all flawed, but we're all redeemable, and that we all can find our way back to the light, And so I always, I think if I have like a pre-marriage, pre-kids, I think I could sometimes find myself in a pretty cynical, borderline nihilistic place. And it was reflected in a lot of my early work too. And then sort of post, marriage and kids, that's where I started to kind of find a different kind of footing and a different message. And I thought horror's a really great way to kind of Trojan horse these things into.
For sure, it's always been.
Yeah.
It's incredible how often we talk to people who, have been in the horror genre, worked in the horror space for years, or even just been fans for years. And as soon as they have children specifically, their relationship to it completely changes.
It does change.
Yeah.
It does change. And it's funny because I still love gore and violence. And like, I am first in line for Final Destination.
Yes.
Yes.
Like everybody. Because I love that stuff. But for me, if I'm going to do that, there still needs to be something else underneath it. Like there has to be a purpose. Like I'm just not there for gore's sake anymore.
And was Happy Death Day before or after that life change?
It was after.
Okay. Because Happy Death Day has so much heart. Like there's not a lot of horror movies that make me cry.
Yeah.
But Happy Death Day and I think the sequel both did it.
Happy Death Day 1 and 2, both of those movies were me unpacking losing my mom. She had died about a year and a half or 2 years before the first movie. And again, I use my movies like therapy.
Yeah.
It's actually better because I get paid instead of paying someone else. But it was also like the kismet pairing with Jessica because her mom is alive. That sounds terrible. Her mom's alive, but she's so close to her mom. They're absolute best friends, and her mom was on set a lot. And so that's why I think she was able to go to such emotional places with that role as well.
And then with Drop, you have Megan, who, you found her the same way we did apparently through season 2 of White Lotus, which is one of our favorite shows. I didn't watch
The Bull Type and I feel terrible for it, but like it wasn't on my radar.
Us neither, but White Lotus is one of our favorite shows, and one of the best parts about it is how the cast, everyone in it is always so good. But watching season 2, she stands out.
Oh yeah.
Even among...
Everyone was talking about her.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it with my husband and we were both like, wow, she is amazing.
Yeah.
And then she turned into this character that at the beginning you felt like, oh gosh, this woman is like in total denial about her marriage and she's a victim. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh no, she's not.
She's in control.
Holy shit, she is in total control of this thing. And she's a badass. And she's just so charismatic and charming, and she's very authentic, and I think that's my favorite thing about her as an actor and as a person, to be honest. She is who she is. I feel so fortunate that I got to sort of grab her in a moment before she becomes clearly a movie star.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's such a joy and an honor to feel like that this movie is sort of that launching pad, I would say, in some way or another. Like she's obviously out there and everyone knows who she is, but she's never carried something on her own, and she does it so flawlessly.
Yeah, I also appreciate, and podcast listeners will appreciate, that you give Violet Bean a kind of Blumhouse redemption arc, because we know her from Truth or Dare. We just did a March Madness bracket of the worst friends in horror movies.
Amazing.
And she was a
heavy hitter.
She didn't win. She didn't win, but she was one of the highest seeds in that bracket.
Yeah.
And it was
She's the
so
best.
fun to see her in this, because I didn't even recognize her at first.
But she gets to be like, an awesome sister here.
She's great. She's amazing. And she's an amazing person.
Yeah.
Like, she's so much fun to work with. She's a lot like the character in the end. She just has that energy to her. But yeah, it was kind of fun playing with the idea that like, that the character Violet has this kind of cool, hipster, tomboyish
She's like a
sister.
Sarah Sherman from
It's like
SNL
it's really her
kind of
brother, but a
feeling.
sister.
Yes.
In a weird way.
Yes.
You mentioned last night in the Q&A that one of your strengths as a director you feel is casting. And I agree wholeheartedly, just everyone in the cast here.
Yeah, I was curious about that aspect of this, like with her date. He's incredible in this, and kind of going back to the red eye of it all, was there ever any, kind of, I guess, conflict or wavering back and forth during the casting process, whether or not you cast someone like him who does seem very genial and you kind of instinctively trust him, he just seems friendly, versus like a Cillian Murphy where that guy, he looks kind of evil, or he could easily shift to being evil, and you're always kind of on edge with him.
I honestly did not, and the reason why is I strangely didn't really want to cast suspicion on him because I think it undermines the stakes of the movie. So I wanted Henry to be someone that we liked.
Yeah,
and
just
that
as
we
likable
were
as possible.
Yeah, that was just a really likable guy. Because it is an inversion of the trope in the sense that he is the damsel in distress. And so if he was also maybe a bad guy too, if I was trying to make him a red herring, it just felt like too much. It was like a hat on a hat. So I was like, let's keep it. We have a nice giant room filled with people and all these other characters that we can sort of cast suspicion on. Let's keep it to that and then protect. Because ultimately too, underneath all of the stuff that's happening is a romance. And it's hard to have a romance if you think that
don't trust the guy.
Yeah. And by the way, the funny thing is that, when we had a couple test screenings, we still had a lot of people.
Like suspicious of him?
Yes.
It was always in the back of my head of just like,
I think there's just a little, because I think that's just the premise. Like the idea of the movie just already bakes that
is
into
it going to be
the
like
situation.
a big twist?
It gets to a certain point though, where I'm like, if that is the twist, that's just mean, and I don't think
and also
that doesn't make
psychotic.
sense.
Yes,
Like,
that would make zero sense.
because even in the trailer, it's like, you have to kill your date.
Right, there's
So it's
clearly like somebody needs this guy dead.
Yeah.
So it would be weird if he's like, I need myself dead.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, no, that doesn't.
That's too twisty even for me.
Yeah, but I love all the other characters in there because I just didn't expect so many of them to be so enjoyable and funny.
Waiter.
The waiter.
We love the waiter.
It's amazing. It was really important that all of the characters feel like people you've met before or that you've bumped into that sort of are in that kind of, because restaurants and all those kinds of places are funny because everybody's there for a different reason. And even when we cast all of our background. Like it wasn't like we just did a cattle call. Like I hand selected every single person in the room.
Prom kids and everything.
And we built stories around all of them and why they were there and like, was it an anniversary? That kind of couple, is this a big splurge or are they wealthy? Or like, I mean, all those conversations happened even just for background so that we could tell a story in a meaningful way. Like you had the couple that, she runs into at the elevator that is at the table next to them and they're like clearly like hitting their stride as a couple and canoodling constantly. And so, like I said, everybody had a little mini story to tell there. And I thought that's what kind of gives the room its life.
It does, yeah. It feels very lively, lived in and fleshed out.
Yeah, and that adds to the kind of whodunit too, where it just feels like there's infinite possibilities. And like crafting a good whodunit is really hard, especially, because even just, you get that premise of like, well, who's sending the messages? And you have to realize your audience is instantly doing all the math in their head of like, okay, it could be this person. And I think that the reveal in this works so well because I genuinely, and looking back, I'm like, I should have.
It's a hat trick. It's a real hat trick. And I honestly, leading up to the first test screening, I really had no idea if we were gonna pull it off or not.
Like, were you worried it would be too obvious? Or?
I just couldn't. It's just, you go into a lot of these things with feeling like you're doing it the right way, but sometimes you go and you're like, oh shit, like.
Especially after spending months with it.
Yeah, where it's like, the story
you do lose a little
inside
objectivity,
now.
but there were a few like markers that were a big relief when we had our first test screening.
Yes, if you don't want to get spoiled, skip like 10 seconds. I genuinely leaned over and I was like, I trusted it. I did feel genuine betrayal.
Yeah. And that was another thing that, in the writing, wanted him to be like, you felt sorry for the guy.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I felt protective of him.
Yeah, it's like this poor, because it's another place that I think a lot of people can relate to, or they feel, some kind of empathy toward, because it's like, you're so vulnerable on a date and you just want to be liked. And, and he's up against a wall the second his date arrives, and you realize that she is not into him one bit, and that he doesn't look like whatever he said he's gonna look like.
Did you see The Substance?
I did.
He reminded me of Fred, her
friend.
classmate.
Friend,
just like, I was like,
so sad.
Yeah, and so I was just in that mindset. And
yeah, totally.
How long did you spend on the set?
On the actual set?
Yeah.
We shot on set for 20 days.
Okay, so like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And that was in Ireland?
Yep, Dublin, Ireland.
And then you did those extra. Were any of the exterior shots done here? Was
Exterior
it in Chicago?
shots? No, everything was shot in Ireland.
Oh, okay.
We had to do a lot of some fancy, fun sort of digital work to kind of switch. Like when we would look down outside, like we had to change the lanes and things.
Oh, sure.
They drive on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
Things like that. I had to go to Chicago and shoot plates, a lot of plates.
I was wondering if it was plates or like Pond 5
No,
coming in to save the day.
It was all plates that we shot in Chicago.
Okay.
But then we had to combine some stuff too, which was like anyone from Chicago who sees the movie, we apologize in advance. But there's definitely a couple like landmarky things that are Dublin.
Okay.
But they were so visually cool that we were like, I don't want to remove them.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it was, that first shot when Violet gets out of the Uber and she looks up at the building, that building is not there.
Oh, okay. Wait, what do you mean it's not there?
It's not a real building.
It's just a fake building.
It's a digital building.
Wow. Okay.
Because there are no high rises in Dublin, Ireland.
Is this the first movie that you're directing from a script that you didn't write or like didn't help rewrite or? I know that you did have some like.
I definitely had a lot of input
Yeah.
on the script.
Was it just like something where you read it and you were like, oh, this feels like a project that I would have written, or it didn't?
It didn't actually. That's what's
No,
kind of
okay.
funny about it, is that I read it and I was like, this is such a blast. It's so well constructed. I loved the premise. I loved how clean it was. It reminded me of something that I may have done a long time ago, like when I wrote Disturbia. So I don't think that they're far apart, because that was an original script that I wrote. And so this kind of felt like a more grown-up version of that. And that was, I think, the bigger appeal for me, was that like I've spent so much time making movies and writing movies about really young people, which I love. Like this felt like a very cool, I called it my grown-up movie.
Well, thanks so much for talking to us, man.
Thank you guys, I
thank you
appreciate
Can't wait for
it.
this to come out and
much.
for everyone to see it.
Thank you.
Awesome.